Hi, welcome to ghd-repair.co.uk. My name's Trevor Matthews. I wanted to show customers the difference between the Type 1 cable and the Type 2 and the Type 3. The Type 1 and Type 3 cables look very similar, but they are completely different and not compatible. So it's really important that you choose the correct cable before ordering. That is a Type 1 cable, and if you've opened up your irons you will see that it plugs in to a small circuit board like that, which is at the end of the irons. You'll find it assembled like that in the irons. Now unfortunately the Type 3 cable, which I shall introduce now, is very similar. So Type 1 at the top, Type 3 at the bottom. You'll notice that they are different though, and this Type 3 cable will not fit. We get many customers, unfortunately, especially over this last 6 months, who are ordering the wrong cable, and then they're wasting money and time returning the cable for the correct one. So that is a close-up look at a Type 1 cable. Now, the range of irons that this cable is fitted to starts from this very excuse me, a very old GHD. This one doesn't even have a model number on it. It's one of the first they ever produced, but notice this squared off end. So that would definitely be a Type 1 cable required. As I say, there's no model number, there is a code number on the label here. But if you've got anything with this type of end, and I'll show the others in a minute, then that is definitely a Type 1 cable, and it will have this circuit board inside right in the end there. The next model was the GHD3. Again, you'll notice this end, you've got a rubber O-ring, a cap here, and that cap is screwed in place with 2 screws. If the only fault is the cable has been damaged, then with a very fine screwdriver you can actually undo the screws, remove this O-ring and lift off this cover, and you can change this cable without dismantling the irons. Now this particular model is the GHD3, and you'll see that on this label on the inside. But if you see an O-ring and this style of end on your GHDs and the label has perhaps come off, that is definitely a Type 1 cable. No other cable will fit this model. On to the next one. This is the slightly later GHD 3.1. It looks very similar to the Model 3. Slightly different arrangement here. The Model 3 has a removable cover here plus a removable cover here either end. So on the 3 you'll have screws here, here, here and here. You do not need to remove the screws here, just here and here to lift this whole cover off on the 3. 3.1, exactly the same arrangement at the end, O-ring, 2 screws. Same thing, if you just need to change the cable you can undo these and remove the assembly and change the cable. If the little PCB is damaged in any way you will need to separate the irons, and you can look on our website for videos on how to do that. But if you're just changing the cable you can achieve that by removing the screws only. So that is the 3.1. Notice the end. So there are also the wide plate versions, and I'll show you the older one first, which is this model. This is the SS model, and you'll notice that this has the same removable cover here that the Model 3 has, plus also the screws for the main cover. If you do have to take these apart, this is super fragile, do not press on it, you do not need to remove these screws, You just need to remove the screws either end to lift this whole cover off. But notice the end again, exactly the same arrangement, but this time the screws are much more easily accessible. So again, cable only being changed, you can undo the screws, remove the O-ring and take these apart, but you'll see that the end is pretty much the same as all the others that we've looked at. Again, type 1 cable fitted there. They then produced the SS2 model, very much like the 3 and the 3.1s. The difference is now that you have a solid single piece cover with 1, 2, 3 screws holding it in place. Exactly the same end arrangement. Again, pretty good access to the screws if you are only changing the type 1 cable. Then they moved on to model 4.0 and then 4.1 and then 4.2 type 1. Now these are all identifiable by having these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grooves cut or moulded into the end of the irons. So if you have these slots, as I tend to call them, you have definitely got a type 1 cable. No other cable will do the job. Notice that the end now has been changed. This is how the end is on most modern GHDs. This particular pair is a 4.0, but as I said, you might see a 4.1 or a 4.2. The 4.2 comes in 2 different versions, type 1 and type 2. That is not referring to the cable type, that is referring purely to the type of the irons. As I said, this is a type 1 iron because it's got these slots, and I'll show you the type 2, which I've put here somewhere. Yeah, so type 2, this is exactly the same pair of irons, but this is the type 1 with the slots, but this one, you can see there are rows of elongated dots, and they get more and more elongated as they get to the very tip of the irons. So this can have a type 2 cable or a type 3 cable, and we're going to go on to that on a different video. So just that's the difference. The slots means it is a 4.0, 4.1 or 4.2, but type 1. Only the 4.2 has the 2 different variants. 4.0, 4.1, you will only see it with these slots, and you know as soon as you see these slots that you need a type 1 cable. Okay, so hopefully that has cleared that up. That is the type 1 cable, as mentioned. The type 3 cable, which we'll do a separate video for, is this one now at the top, and you can see these plastic collars here are quite a much larger diameter than the type 1. So do not order the type 3 cable. For any of those irons you've just seen, it is definitely a type 1.